It's really something how the places we first know, the way they sound, the smells, just the feel of everyday life there, and especially the people who anchor those places for us. They don't just sort of fade away, do they? They become these, fundamental building blocks of who we turn out to be. They shape how we see everything long before we even have words for it.
Absolutely. Our first environments, they're definitely more than just scenery. They're formative. They basically lay down the landscape where our identity starts taking root, influencing how we understand, well, everything that follows.
And today, we get this fantastic chance to take a real deep dive into that foundational landscape for one of the most, truly indelible voices of the 20th century, Maya Angelou.
Yeah.
Our source material for this exploration is actually a set of excerpts. They're pulled right from the opening pages of her incredible autobiography, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings.
And these passages, they're not just introductory fluff. They give us this detailed, really sensory-rich immersion into Angelou's early childhood down in Stamps, Arkansas. We're going to be using her specific words, these exact descriptions she shares, as our guide.
Exactly. So our mission for this deep dive is to really unpack these foundational moments in Stamps. We want to try and understand the world she's describing, through her young eyes, but maybe with our perspective now.
Right.
And see precisely how these early interactions, these observations and feelings, how they lay the groundwork for the huge themes that just resonate through the whole book and her whole amazing life. We're getting right into the text itself. I'm really eager to dig into these pages.
And I'm definitely ready to help illuminate the significance, the really profound meaning packed into the specific details and the language she chooses from this really critical time in her development.
Okay, let's unpack this then. We should start right at the beginning, really, of the journey she takes us on when she and her brother Bailey arrive in Stamps, Arkansas. What do these first bits in the source material tell us about Stamps itself and, young Maya's initial feelings when she got there?
Well, the sources, they immediately kind of pull us into the sensory world of Stamps. And it's overwhelmingly focused on one place, the William Johnson General Store.
Ah, the store.
Yeah. The text makes it crystal clear right from the start that this store is way, way more than just a shop. It's really the heart, the nucleus of the community.
And the way she describes it, it's not just a list, is it? It's painted with such incredible detail. What are some of the things from the text, the description of the store, that really jump out at you?
The sense of smell is huge. It hits you right away in the text. Angelou writes about, I think it's the sweet aroma of pine sap mingling with the stinging odor of carbolic acid. Just think about that contrast for a second. Something natural, pleasant, the pine, maybe from the wood. And then, boom, this harsh disinfectant smell. That early sensory detail, it already kind of hints at the complex, sometimes contradictory world she's stepping into.
Wow.
Then she gives this list, this specific list of things that add up to the store's unique, almost overpowering smell profile. Salted fish, wood, coal oil, patent medicines, and axle grease.
Wow, what a combination. That's not just a few nice smells. It's potent, practical, almost industrial, really. It sounds like survival, like the absolute essentials for a tough kind of life.
Absolutely. And the description keeps going, moving past smell to what you see, what you might touch. We read about the physical setup, the long counter, these imposing sacks of feed, fertilizer, and flour that stand like silent sentinels.
Silent sentinels. I like that.
Yeah, it gives these inanimate things this watchful, almost protective feeling, doesn't it? Then there are bins of sugar, rice, and dried beans, just the basics. She mentions the meat counter, fresh meat and sides of salted pork, again pointing to the need for preservation back then. Right. Even the candy counter gets a specific mention. Peppermint sticks, jawbreakers, and licorice whips. A little touch of childhood sweetness right there amidst all the hard realities.
It feels less like just a building and more like a living thing almost, like a character itself packed with all the stuff of the community's day-to-day life.
It really is shown that way. The sources, they emphasize its location too, described as being right at the heart of the Negro area of Stamps.
Okay.
But the text doesn't just say where it is, it shows what it does. It's where the Black community comes together, not just to buy things, but to gather, swap news, to just be with each other.
Yeah.
It's the economic anchor, sure, handling accounts for sharecroppers, providing essential goods, but it's equally, maybe even more importantly, the main social hub, the emotional center even. It's the space where community happens, where it's reinforced daily.
So just stepping back from the specific items and the smells for a second, why are these details, the exact goods listed, the particular smells, the layout, why are they so critical for her to put right there at the beginning? It feels like she's doing more than just setting the scene.
Exactly. This isn't just, random memory recall. Angelou is meticulously building a reality for us, the reader.
Hmm.
By detailing things like feed, fertilizer, coal oil, she immediately grounds us in a life tied to the land, to farming, to basic, often really hard necessities.
Right.
The focus on salted fish and pork that speaks directly to the difficulty of keeping food fresh, the limited access maybe to fresh stuff in that time and place, and including patent medicines.
Mm-hmm.
That's a poignant touch, isn't it? It subtly suggests a world where maybe proper medical care was hard to come by or too expensive for many.
Yeah, definitely.
It points to self-reliance, using whatever remedies you could find.
So it's economic history, it's social commentary, it's a window into daily struggles, all just embedded in describing stuff in a store.
Precisely. She creates this tangible reality, a world built on resilience, on practicality, on constantly sort of making do. Through this incredibly detailed picture of the store, Angelou isn't just telling us about life in this rural southern black community during the Depression era.
Yeah.
She's showing us, she's letting us feel the texture, the constraints of how they lived. The store, in this description, it becomes a microcosm, like a condensed version of the whole community's lifeblood and its challenges. It's a powerful symbol.
And thinking about this as a listener, encountering this world through her words, it really does make you pause and reflect on the physical spaces that were central to your own early life, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Were there places, maybe a corner shop, a certain room in your house, a park that carried that same kind of weight, defined by particular smells or sights, that just felt like the absolute heart of your world back then?
That's the magic of her specificity, I think. Angelou's very personal, very detailed memories of the store, they resonate because they tap into that universal thing. The indelible mark that important places leave on us as we're developing. They become almost synonymous with our first sense of belonging, our first grasp of reality.
Okay, so moving from the place to the people in it, what about the absolutely central figure introduced almost right away, her grandmother, Mama? The source material gives us such a powerful first impression of her.
Mama Henderson, Annie Henderson formally, yet she's presented as the absolute bedrock of this world, the unwavering anchor. The source text, it details her running that store with just remarkable skill and authority. She's shown as a woman of immense strength, dignity, and deeply held principles.
I remember the description of her physical presence almost behind that counter. It wasn't just how she looked, but how she sort of commanded the space.
Yes, that physical description is key. The text notes her posture, erect and proud, how she stood behind the counter like a queen in a beehive. Think about that metaphor. A queen, central, authoritative, overseeing this busy, complex, productive system.
Yeah, that's vivid.
She's often described wearing these long, stiffly starched cotton dresses. Now, that's not just about her clothes, right? It conveys her rigidity, her formality, her almost formidable presence. The stiffness of the starch almost seems to echo her unwavering character, like an inner steel.
Her role clearly went way beyond just handling the money, didn't it?
Oh, far, far beyond. The sources show she's not only a really sharp businesswoman. I mean, imagine navigating the incredibly complex, frankly dangerous social tightrope needed to sell things to both black and white customers in the Jim Crow South.
Wow, yeah.
Maintaining her dignity while sticking to, or maybe subtly subverting, those racial rules. But she's also the undisputed moral compass, the social guide, the practical problem solver for the whole community. People gather at the store, they bring their troubles, their joys, their needs, and she's right there at the center of it all. She represents this specific, really potent kind of strength. It's forged not just by her own will, but by necessity, by deep faith, and by incredibly strong community ties.
This figure of Mama, introduced so early and with such, force, how does her character, as we see it in these first descriptions, how does it sort of foreshadow or hint at the bigger themes Angelou explores later in the book?
Her resilience is just immediately powerfully obvious.
Yeah.
The sheer act of running a successful business, of holding your head erect and proud when faced with constant racial oppression and economic hardship, set to a staggering strength, intelligence, and this deep, nuanced understanding of how to navigate oppressive systems without letting them completely crush you. Her sternness, but also her profound love, provides young Maya with this vital sense of security, discipline, and unconditional love in what was otherwise a deeply insecure and often hostile world. This powerful figure's strength, moral authority. Facing down adversity, she doesn't just hint at themes of survival. She embodies the very core of resilience, inner power, and the critical importance of strong female figures. That's absolutely central to Angelou's whole journey in the book.
Yeah.
She's the living proof of the quiet, powerful resistance and profound dignity that so many people in that community possessed. Angelou shows us right away where the strength she'd later need came from.
It really feels like seeing the taproot of that strength right from page 1. Okay, so we've got this vivid, symbolic setting of the store and this powerful anchor figure, Mama. Let's shift now maybe from the general place and the central figure to the more deeply personal experience of young Maya, the child narrator, as she's navigating this world herself.
Right, and this is where the sources start to pull back the curtain on the deeply felt reality of growing up in Stamps. Specifically, under that pervasive, inescapable system of segregation and its direct personal impact on a child's developing sense of who they are.
And how does Angelou, using her child narrator's voice, her observations, how does she convey that early, maybe not fully intellectualized, but profoundly felt awareness of her specific place in this rigidly defined racial hierarchy?
Well, the sources show us not just the physical separation,
Yeah.
The black part of town versus the white part, but the social and psychological gap. Crucially, Angelou illustrates the unwritten, unspoken, yet terrifyingly strict rules that governed how black people and white people interacted. We see specific moments, maybe brief scenes, that highlight the tension, the prescribed roles, the careful sort of acting required.
Can you point to any specific descriptions or maybe phrases from the text that really capture that feeling of separation or those subtle and maybe not so subtle required behaviors?
The text might describe, say, moments when white customers come into the store, and the immediate shift you feel in the air, the changing conversation rhythm, the subtle tension that suddenly crackles. Angelou describes the specific expectations placed on black people, having to look down or away when talking to a white person seen as superior, which was most of them.
Right.
The careful choosing of words, the forced smile, the deferential posture. She doesn't just state these rules, she describes the feeling that goes with performing them. The text conveys the weight of that performance, the internal discomfort or fear it creates, even in a child.
Yeah.
There might be a description of walking down a street and knowing the invisible lines you couldn't cross, or maybe noticing the difference in the quality of the roads or houses in the different parts of town.
It's that gut feeling of otherness, isn't it? That constant low-level background noise reminding you that you belong, yes, but only within this defined, devalued space, and that your safety, your family's safety, depends entirely on following these demeaning arbitrary rules.
Precisely. Angelou doesn't talk about segregation in abstract terms. She makes it personal, immediate, something you experience through her eyes. The text shows how Jim Crow wasn't just some laws written down somewhere. It was woven into the fabric of every single daily interaction.
Wow.
It demanded this constant, exhausting performance of humility, of compliance, a deliberate hiding of your true feelings or abilities, this constant heightened awareness of your race in relation to the dominant oppressive group. It's shown as being profoundly formative for young Maya, shaping how she saw herself from a really early age. She shows you the internal toll.
It's incredibly powerful how she uses those specific observations, a glance avoided, a certain tone of voice, a posture, to make the feeling of segregation so real for the reader. Yet amidst all that external pressure and the awareness of division, the sources also show this profoundly strong sense of belonging, of warmth, of shared experience within the Black community itself.
Yes. And the store, once again, is a primary setting for this. The sources describe it as a true gathering place, almost a sanctuary, where people could, at least for a little while, shed some of the burdens the outside world placed on them.
Okay.
Here, they could largely just be themselves, sharing troubles, celebrating small wins, laughing, sharing this deep, common understanding. The description of how Black customers interact with each other, or how Mama interacts with her community, often conveys this ease, this shared language, this deep, unspoken mutual understanding that really stands in stark contrast to the descriptions of interactions with white people.
So it's not just a necessary shop, but a vital, life-affirming space, a place for solidarity, for reinforcing that communal identity.
Exactly. It's where that essential community strength we talked about earlier is made visible, it's reinforced, it's actively lived out. The text shows neighbors looking out for each other, maybe sharing scarce resources, pooling their knowledge, finding comfort in shared experiences. That collective experience of navigating a hostile outside world, it creates incredibly strong bonds within the community. They aren't just people living near each other, they're a collective, interdependent unit. It's a vital source of identity affirmation, emotional support, and practical resilience. This community acts as the essential buffer, shielding its members as much as possible from the constant harshness outside.
And that idea, community as a source of strength, it's just so relevant to understanding human experience everywhere, isn't it? It highlights that in any time, facing challenges or discrimination, having places where you feel fully seen, accepted, supported, it isn't just nice to have, it's crucial. Crucial for survival and for building the capacity to thrive.
It really underscores that point that individual resilience, while vital, is so often nurtured and sustained by those collective bonds, by mutual aid. Angelou shows us, through specific interactions in the store and the neighborhood described in the text, the fundamental role this community played in nurturing her and providing the foundation for her own later strength.
It makes perfect sense. This community really is depicted as the wellspring of the strength we first see embodied in Mama. But even within these serious realities, segregation, the need for community the excerpts we're looking at also managed to capture moments that feel purely like childhood. You know, moments of simple innocence, wonder, maybe even mischief or quiet observation.
Yes.
But these moments are often, subtly, or maybe not so subtly, tinged with the child's growing, sometimes painful, understanding of the complex world she's in.
That precise juxtaposition is one of Angelou's signature narrative achievements, and it's really powerful in these early chapters. She's brilliant at keeping that authentic child's perspective, seeing the world with its immediate wonders and confusions, while simultaneously, implicitly, weaving in the adult narrator's later understanding of the bigger social and historical context that shaped those moments.
Can you give us an example from the sources, a moment where that innocence and awareness kind of collide or coexist?
Well, think about descriptions of just simple, everyday kid stuff. Maybe playing games with Bailey, watching the adults, or just moments of quiet noticing. The sources might describe the simple pleasure of, say, watching dust motes dancing in a sunbeam coming into the store.
Yeah.
Or the feeling of the rough wooden floor under bare feet. These are things common to lots of childhoods, universal in their sensory immediacy. The text might describe the routine of chores, or looking forward to a small treat from that candy counter.
Right, those seemingly universal, innocent moments of just being a kid. But then, like you said, something happens or she notices something that subtly or sharply reminds the reader and the child of the adult world's difficulties and harshness.
Exactly. The source might describe a moment of childhood fun or daydreaming that gets abruptly cut short by a white person arriving. Or maybe by overhearing a snatch of conversation about racial politics that the child senses is important but doesn't fully grasp. Or perhaps an interaction that seems okay on the surface to the child. But the adult narrator's language fills it with this underlying tension or power dynamic that a careful reader picks up on, stemming from the racial hierarchy. These are those crucial points where the child's immediate innocent experience bumps up against or gets subtly colored by the ever-present adult reality of segregation and the challenges of their world.
So the game stops, or the simple wonder gets kind of overshadowed or reframed by this intrusion of complex, often difficult awareness.
Yes. The text shows how those external forces, the big social structures, they don't just exist around her life as some distant thing. They actively push into and shape even her most personal, seemingly innocent experiences. This isn't a story about a childhood lived separately from the world's problems. It's about a childhood lived within and constantly shaped by those realities. The narrative power comes from showing how those outside pressures are internalized and processed, even by a young mind.
And what does this powerful mix of innocence and dawning awareness tell us about the human experience, particularly when you're in challenging circumstances?
Well, it highlights the incredible resilience of the human spirit, doesn't it? Even in a child. To seek out, find, and hold on to moments of joy, beauty, connection, simple pleasure, even when surrounded by systemic hardship and deep injustice. It's really a testament to our capacity to find light even in dark places. But it also shows the undeniable cost. That the world, especially a world defined by such rigid and cruel divisions, forces an early awareness. It strips away certain layers of uncomplicated innocence way too soon. It's a powerful portrayal of both the harshness of the environment outside and the remarkable internal ability of the self to still find little pockets for simple being and quiet joy.
That deep processing of the world, both the good bits and the hard bits, connects directly, I think, to the development of her own emerging sense of self during this critical time. The text gives us these really valuable glimpses into young Maya's inner thoughts and feelings.
It absolutely does. These early chapters are foundational for understanding her internal journey. We see her earliest reflections on who she is, how she sees herself, and how she thinks others see her. The sources often include moments where she thinks about her physical appearance, She frequently felt awkward, clumsy, or unattractive,
Yeah.
often comparing herself unfavorably to her older brother Bailey, who she just adored and saw as, perfect.
Yes, that painful, almost universal feeling of early self-consciousness, but maybe amplified by this specific context.
Exactly. Or her thoughts about her intelligence, her shyness, her place within that complex family structure headed by Mama, and how she's seen by people outside her immediate family. These are the first internal dialogues, the very beginnings of her conscious self-awareness. She's trying to process the messages from the outside world and figure out her own worth, her own identity.
Mm-hmm.
This is the internal grappling with external circumstances, including those racial dynamics and the beauty standards society imposes, that will really shape so much of her later life.
It truly feels like watching the very start of the complex internal journey she chronicles so powerfully throughout the whole autobiography. How do these early internal struggles that we see in these passages, how do they set the stage for her later development, her later achievements?
Well, they lay the essential groundwork for the deep-seated challenges she'll wrestle with throughout the book. Feelings of inadequacy, that painful search for belonging and self-acceptance, figuring out her identity as a Black woman in a racist society.
Right.
But crucially, they also highlight her innate abilities, even at this young age. Her sharp observational skills, her sensitivity, her deep, introspective way of processing the world. The fact that she is already having these complex internal reflections as a child is a powerful sign of the intellectual and emotional depth that would later fuel her work as a writer, as a poet. These early internal struggles weren't just difficulties. They're the fertile ground from which her later voice and strength would grow. They're the seeds of her profound empathy and insight.
Which brings us perfectly to what is undeniably one of the most striking, most celebrated parts of Maya Angelou's work. And it's powerfully clear even in these opening passages. Her absolute mastery of language. Even with the child narrator, the way she describes the world isn't simple. It's incredibly vivid, evocative, and just so precise.
Absolutely. The sources we've been talking about are prime examples of her extraordinary command of language.
Yeah.
They show not only her really sharp, sensitive observational skills, but her innate, almost magical ability to translate those observations, those feelings, those experiences into words that just bring the past alive for the reader.
Let's spend a minute pulling out and maybe dissecting some specific examples from the source text. What are some phrases or images or uses of language that particularly jump out at you as showing this mastery in these early pages?
Well, we touched on a couple already, like the silent sentinels, sacks of flour, or Mama as a queen in a beehive. These aren't just simple descriptions. They're carefully chosen metaphors that elevate the objects, the people, give them symbolic weight, deeper meaning. Think about how she might describe the quality of the light, or the texture of the dust on the road, or the specific sound of a screen door slamming. The sources likely have phrases where she gives human qualities to inanimate objects, or uses striking similes comparing one thing to something unexpected, making something familiar feel new and important. There might be descriptions of smells that don't just name the scent, but describe the feeling it brings up, or the memory it triggers.
Or, like you mentioned earlier, the way she captures dialogue. It feels so real, so rich with the specific voice and rhythm of that community. Even simple exchanges seem to reveal layers about the characters or the social situation.
Precisely. The rhythm, the vocabulary, the exact phrasing of the conversations she recounts. Those are deliberate choices. They convey not just the literal meaning, but the cultural context, the emotional undercurrents, the power dynamics happening. She uses the vernacular, the everyday language of the Black South, not just as a recording, but as a literary tool. She respects its expressive power and gives it literary weight.
So when we analyze why Angelou chose those particular words, that specific image, that precise way of phrasing something, what does that intense focus on linguistic detail tell us about her goals as a writer and her relationship with her own past?
It tells us that for Angelou, the past isn't just a static list of historical facts or dry events. It's a living, breathing, multisensory reality.
Yeah.
And she's inviting, almost compelling, the reader to experience it right alongside her.
Yeah.
Her detailed descriptions, her carefully chosen words, her striking use of figurative language. They don't just describe stamps. They let you feel like you've been transported there. You can almost smell the coal oil, see Mama standing tall and stiff, hear the specific intonations of the voices in the store. She uses language to breach that gap between her memory and the reader's present moment, making history feel immediate and intensely personal.
It really takes her personal story, her memoir, and elevates it into universal art, doesn't it? It allows readers from totally different backgrounds to connect with the core human experiences she's showing us.
It absolutely does, and it speaks volumes about her perspective, even as a child. These early passages suggest a kid who wasn't just passively going through life, but was actively, intensely observing, processing, internalizing the world around her with a sensitivity and intelligence that would later become her hallmark as a writer and poet. Her choice of details and how she renders them, even in these early memories, points to an innate literary sensibility.
And finally, how does this early, clear attention to language, this deep way of seeing and describing the world, connect to those absolutely central themes of finding one's voice and speaking truth that she's so famous for in her later life and work?
Well, her early life and stance, as these sources show, it's a world full of moments where voice is suppressed or constrained. Segregation forces, silences, social hierarchies dictate what you can and can't say and how you say it.
Right.
Navigating the complexities of identity in that world creates this profound need for a voice, a way to articulate the inner experience that often contradicts the external expectations. The sources depict young Maya as observant, often quiet, sometimes withdrawn, just soaking everything in with intense sensitivity. Her inherent gift for language, this deep intuitive connection to words that's clear even in her earliest memories, that's the raw material, the potent tool. The entire journey of I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings is, in so many fundamental ways, about the process of finding the courage, the means, the confidence to use that language, to speak her truth, to transform those enforced silences and internal struggles into powerful, articulate song. These early passages, showing her deep engagement with the sensory world and her instinct for vivid description, they illustrate the fertile ground where that extraordinary voice began to take root, nurtured by keen observation, deep feeling, and this intrinsic, powerful connection to words.
We have truly only just scratched the surface of the incredible depth packed into these opening pages of I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. But hopefully, by slowing down and really unpacking these specific excerpts, these vivid details of stamps, the smells of the store, the strength of mama, the feeling of that invisible racial line, the mix of childhood innocence and dawning awareness, and especially the sheer power of Angelou's language, hopefully, it gives you a deeper, maybe more nuanced appreciation for the rich, complex foundation of her entire story.
What's truly fascinating here, I think, and what Angelou's precise language really shows us, is how these seemingly small, sensory-level details from her earliest childhood, the smell of coal oil, the starch in mama's dress, the quality of dust in the air, how they all build together to create this complex, profoundly insightful understanding of identity, community, and resilience, especially resilience in the face of systemic oppression.
Yeah.
It's a powerful embodied reminder that the places we come from and the specific people who raise us, they leave an indelible mark. They shape not just our memories, but the very structure of how we perceive the world and our place in it.
It really does make you pause and think about your own story, doesn't it? Consider how the specific, maybe almost mundane details and sensory experiences from your own early life, perhaps the specific smell of your grandmother's kitchen on a Sunday, the distinct sounds of a particular street you grew up on, the feel of a worn-out toy or blanket, how those might hold profound, maybe unexpected clues to the person you are today. And how the act of simply recalling and recounting those specific details, even just for yourself, can be a really powerful act of discovery, of understanding, and maybe even affirmation.